You're listening to a replay of Zach and Evan on Z Radio Live.
The website music station at Z Radio Live. This is Zach and Evan, and joining us over the phone is a singer-songwriter. He's also a guitarist for Malfunkshun, the Fire Ants, Devilhead, and so much more. He has an extensive musical career history. It's Kevin Wood. Kevin, how you doing? And thanks again for joining us here on Zach and Evan.
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So your background, you're a guy who's played guitar for a long time, and you got an opportunity to probably play with a lot of interesting and influential people, especially in grunge, because you're from Seattle. Just tell us a little bit about your experience growing up in that scene.
Well, the scene was sort of grew up around the late 80s, early 90s, actually, the grunge concept, right? Grunge was something that the younger bands were putting out, like Nirvana, for instance. That was it was a post-punk experience, and Malfunkshun was never really grunge, although we were on the bottom floor of that particular movement that got pretty big. The grunge, I don't know, it was a moniker that sort of applied to in not only the younger guys with the post-punk sound, but also a fashion movement. And you know how the mainstream can kind of pull everything together and create something that really is sort of not exactly what it really is. You know, what I came up in was a group of musicians who were emulating their music of preference. Soundgarden, Green River at the time, Malfunkshun. We were all rock bands playing heavy music, and so the grunge moniker is not so descriptive of really what was going on, but it was definitely a scene that was coming out of the first wave of punk music, and melded into more of I'd say a metal-ish kind of sound. A lot of people have called Alice in Chains a metal band. Soundgarden certainly has aspects of metal. Malfunkshun was definitely heavy in that regards, but more, I think we're talking about more of a plodding sense of metal in a doom sort of way. Like Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
But, grunge has always been more of a post-punk thing. To me, that's how I've always seen it.
So, you started off with Malfunkshun back in 1980, and then you guys broke up around 1988. Well, what was the reason for you guys breaking up? And then, I see you went through a ton of other different bands, but, what was that reason for the first breakup?
Well, the breakup was not really a formal breakup. It was our singer, my brother Andy. He also played bass. He joined up with Mother Love Bone, which was the remnants of Green River. And so he didn't have a lot of time to do both bands. And so we took a pretty extended hiatus. And in the meantime, I started new projects, Fire Ants, Devilhead, whatnot. And so, yeah, it wasn't really a breakup so much, but a hiatus.
Makes sense.
But unfortunately, with Andy's death, we could never bring that back into the forefront.
Totally understand. And that, and when a band member sometimes passes away, it does definitely leave a mark in the music but you still keep that legacy of his going on. What was your favorite project to work on throughout the years? I mean, because you started back in 1980, going back to now, you've had literally a major decade career in music.
Yeah. Well, of course, Malfunkshun was my baby. I mean, it was something that, being the first, well, it wasn't actually the very first band I was in, but the first real band that started doing gigs and recording and whatnot. That was probably the closest and dearest to my heart as far as my experience goes. It was, the cutting of teeth. Basically, Malfunkshun learn how to play as we were playing. So it was a coming up experience, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're in that, you know, your brother leaves to go do different projects, and then ultimately the project that he is working on becomes, unfortunately, after he passes away, it becomes one of the biggest bands in grunge and maybe even of all time. And you got to kind of, was it kind of weird to kind of see that all happen, knowing that it happened on such sad circumstances for you personally?
Oh yeah, well yeah, that was quite a blow. I mean, I know that when Green River was disbanding, I was very keen on trying to pick up some of the members of Green River and bring them into Malfunkshun because, well, Andy didn't want to play the bass anymore, and I was thinking that Stoney and Jeff would be perfect for pulling in a rhythm guitar player and a bass player. So yeah, it was, you know, kind of a tough pill to swallow when things just turned out differently. They had a completely different idea in taking my singer and drummer and forming a band themselves. I mean, they were a pretty tight-knit group, you know, very cliquish. And, you know, I really wasn't, you know, part of the scene so much. I used to go to play the gigs, go to practice, do the recording, and go back to Bainbridge Island where I lived. So I didn't hang out with the people, and so maybe that was the reason why that was never really considered an option. I don't know. But yeah, it was pretty rough. I mean, I always kind of figured something around the corner would open up for me, and it did. I mean, I had some pretty good runs there with other groups, and you know, the Fire Ants was next for me, and that was an amazing experience. And then of course Devilhead grew out of that. So I mean, you know, I did have some great opportunities come up, and you know, in retrospect, it was a tough pill to swallow. But and then of course losing my brother through a heroin accident, but you know, life goes on, and I've continued playing, and you know, I still play every day. I'm working on some new stuff now, actually. But
who are some of your favorite experiences, especially just the people you got to work with and be around when you were recording and with different bands and in the studio? What were some of the highlights for you?
I don't know that the highlights, of course, were the studio sessions. I think for Devilhead, and I got to work with some amazing guys. Brian and I created Devilhead out of Fire Ants. Brian and I were in Fire Ants together with Chad Channing and Dan McDonald, and then we went formed Devilhead and we're on Loose Groove. And we managed to get some great guys in the band, some very talented people, and the recording sessions were fun and rewarding, and I have a warm spot in my heart for those memories of those recording sessions, and then you know, the gigs, of course, were, you know, gigs are always the greatest, but I'd say that was probably the number one. When we were filling clubs with the Fire Ants, that was pretty darn fun too. That was, you know, the thing is, I'm known for Malfunkshun, and we had some great gigs, and we did some good recordings, but not enough recordings, of course. But the days of Malfunkshun, you know, coming up, it was a lot of work and trying to get crowds and stuff. But the success I had with my later bands, of course, eclipsed Malfunkshun, but I'm more known for Malfunkshun than anything else.
Yeah, and that's a tribute to what you've done with that band too. I want to ask you about, you know, because you've started recording back in the 80s, and now, you know, you're still recording today. And I know the recording, you know, style has changed so drastically. Do you miss that kind of old style of, you know, record one to tape and just get it out there, as opposed to now there's so much producing going on in music?
No, I like the new technology, and it makes things so much faster and so much more forgiving. I think that there are advantages to the old way, and that you worked your ass off to get tight as a band before you spent the money to record. And when you're recording to tape, you wanted it to be a take, and with minimal overdubs and, none of the, editing that can happen when you can lean on the technology, which can become a trap. And I have to admit, I've gotten caught in those traps before when I've gone to the studio with guys that were not rehearsed. We just started recording stuff and saying, well, this part works here. Maybe 60 takes in, we're going, well, we can put it all together when we mix. But, that's not really the best thing. Actually, that can take more time than actually being tight and going in and doing it right the first way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Kevin Wood, it's an honor to have you on here on Zach and Evan. We appreciate your time. Before we let you go, kind of what's next for you? What can people be on the lookout for?
I'm doing session work, remote session work now, working with Preston and some other guys that I'm getting clients here and there. I'm also working on new recordings, working with Mike Stone again, who is a drummer in Devilhead. I'm getting some drum tracks from him to start building a new collection of songs, which should be fun and interesting. So yeah, I'm still out here. I'm still doing stuff, and thanks for asking.
Not a problem at all. Again, thanks again for hopping on here on Zach and Evan. We'll be right back with more Zach and Evan here on the website music station Z Radio Live.
Miss the show? Catch Zach and Evan every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on Z Radio Live.